our executive director from the health department here with us this evening, and she wanted to visit with us about some of the matters that the health department is facing, and some of the concerns from a public health standpoint, and anything else that she may want to cover. So.
Okay.
Before we do that, should we move to excuse the guys that aren't here, or do we have to do that in work sessions?
No?
Yeah, okay.
This is one packet?
Yep, one packet, just take a folder
Okay.
and pass them along.
All right, thank you.
I appreciate you having me come and present today. As you said, my name is Anna Kinder, Executive Director of the Health Department. I am a native of Casper, so it's kind of exciting to be in this position. There are few and far between. My grandfather was on West Yellowstone with Gustafson Auto Repair, if you've been here for a while. So lots of roots here, and so it's kind of exciting to be in this position. Have worked in public health for 19 years, 11 of those at the health department. Was authorized to start work in May and then fully appointed on July 1st. So yes, I'm a newbie. So I haven't had the opportunity to come and talk with you all, and I apologize. It's taken me to this point, but excited to be here. So thank you for allowing me to do so. I wanted to kind of provide some information for you. 20 minutes isn't very long to talk about all the services that we provide, but I did try to put a lot of information in the folder. We included our annual report from 2018 as well as some general information. I did provide in there a breakdown of our funding streams. As you can see, we get funding from the city, the county, state, maternal child health and TANF funds, prevention funds. Those funds come through the Wyoming Department of Health through the county commissioners to us, and we work with Mercer House on those. Prevention is kind of a wide thing that we'll talk about here in a moment, and then a lot of miscellaneous funds. And you can see that it's almost $1.8 million. Most of those funds are tied specifically to a grant, so we can't move the funding around for them. They're specific deliverables that we have to do. Happy to break those down for you if you'd like. We just celebrated our 65th year of existence in town. It was a great event. We had over 150 people come through the building and see all the different services. So we had a big banner that talked about all the people that work there and all the different roles that they have. So I included a picture of those. They're very small. We have 40 employees. Right now we have 3 openings is all. So we're full, we're busy, lots of activity is going on. Our board of directors, you can see that they are half appointed by the city, half appointed by the county, and then 1 joint, which you guys just completed 2 months ago, I believe, and we received Christine Nelson, who just joined. We have 5 board members that help us work in all the areas of public health. We have the county health officers, Dr. Mark Dow and Ghazi Ghanem, who help guide us and make sure that we're doing what we need to do. We work very closely with the Department of Health, but they kind of help guide us specifically in Natrona County and in Casper specifically. Adult health is, we have 5 nurses and 1 admin. We travel into people's homes. We do blood pressure checks, serve on a lot of coalitions throughout town. LT 101s, those are what are required if you're in a nursing home, assisted living, or working to go into one of the services. We can receive, right now we've received 65 that will be done in a month, and we can go up to 90 in a month's time. So with 5 nurses, it gets a little crazy. Right now is super crazy at the health department with the fact that we're getting prepared for back to school vaccinations. We have exclusion day on October 2nd where kids are excused from school if they don't have the required vaccinations. Usually that's not a very fun day at our health department because people are always usually pretty angry with everybody that's there. So and the LT 101s are really busy right now as well. We provide case management services, so a lot of movement with the home health agencies in town. Conflict-free, where things kind of align differently. Who provides skilled nursing and who provided case management services. It was a state mandated thing. It's really had a huge impact on our community, where a lot of places are providing the case management, but they're not providing skilled nursing. And so people are being forced from their homes into more of the skilled nursing facilities, but we're always out of beds. We don't have enough in town. But in August alone, we did 242 visits. The disease prevention clinic, we're hoping to add 2 additional nurses in this realm. We deal with all of the STDs, immigration, immunization, TB, family planning, Title X, a lot of education, and we have the Expedition Project under this department, where we receive special funding from the state to help us get out into places that we're not typically going. We have high risk factors in our substance use and high STDs, which means that highly likely that there's a high amount of HIV in our community. We just haven't been able to find it or locate it. So going out into those different areas than we typically would do to try to locate that group of population. Sadly, this is what we get from the Wyoming Department of Health. It's a map that just shows everything that's going on in our community. Unfortunately, Natrona is always very high in the number of STDs we have. Chlamydia and gonorrhea were typically #1 in all of those areas. But I can say that there is a good sign of those. It's probably because of the amount of testing that we do and the places that we go. We have a full-time STD clinic where some of the other communities don't have that. But we're also #1 in the number of vaccinations that we provide in the community as compared to other counties. So there's a good thing. I didn't provide that one for you, but I sure can pass it around if you'd like. This was what was last week. So last week we were dealing with a salmonella potential outbreak. We don't know yet. We haven't got all the factors in place. West Nile, we do have one positive West Nile person. We have one pool that is infected with mosquitoes that are transmitting the virus, so we're still asking people to protect themselves in that realm. So those are kind of our disease prevention clinic. I included a number of how many vaccinations we provided. We're higher this year than we ever have been before Exclusion Day, so we're hoping that Exclusion Day is a kind of a quiet situation. The bad thing is last year the state decided that they didn't think the kindergartners needed to do the Tdap until they were 7, but they changed their mind and went back to 6. So we're going to catch both parties in that regard. So if you want some entertainment and excitement, come and see us on the first Friday of October. But we're starting that, and we're also going to Midwest to do a clinic up there. We do all of the TB risk assessments, treatment, and immigration, and all of the travel evaluations. So if people are planning to travel to a different country, we encourage them to come to the health department to make sure they have the right vaccine and immunizations that they need to travel safely. Environmental health, those are the ones that kind of gets us a lot of attention. We spent some time with Carter working on the food trucks, and that was an experience to have those conversations, and so that was enlightening. That was like my first week on the job. But we inspect the pools, the restaurants, all those kinds of things. You're always welcome to look at our website because it does tell you what is out there for restaurants, you know, kind of indicates where you might want to or may not want to eat, right? So we do a lot of those kinds of activities. One of the things that keeps coming up, which I have sent an email to Liz, is we often get complaints on neighbors throwing their trash out the door and different things like that. I've had conversation with a couple of different people, police and fire, that that's an issue. So we'll be talking someday soon, I'm sure, about that. But it's a very busy area. We also do have the HIV care system where we have the Wyoming AIDS Education and Training Center, which goes out and provides training to healthcare providers throughout the state. It's housed at Casper. That's a job that I did for 19 years. That we tried to make sure people have the most current information about HIV so they know what treatment to provide. We also have HIV case management. We have approximately 40 people that live in our community that we provide services for. And as I said before, the Expedition Project. Maternal child health. This is where we go out and we work with the home visits with new babies, moms coming home. We try to work with them from pre-conception to being pregnant to after they've given birth to ensure that the babies are getting the care that they needed, healthy, interactive, safe, all of those kinds of things. Tomorrow morning we're working with DCI to come in and do a presentation to educate our nurses to know what to look for when we're in the homes and different things like that. So trying to get out and connect with all the different resources that we have. It is a mandated program. It is one of our least funded, however, mandated. So it's very hard that's where a lot of our city and county funds do go, is to support that program. So every time a baby is born, we have so many hours to get in and have some interaction with that parent. They can deny services, but we have to make connection with them. Prevention, this is the funding that comes through the county commissioners: adult binge drinking, underage drinking, suicide, tobacco cessation, and substance abuse. And this is where my counterpart works a lot with the Casper Police Department. Drug take-backs, you'll see or hear about the TIPS classes that we do. Did a presentation with the county commissioners last week, so the city has already put in place that they have to participate in TIPS training in order to have their liquor license. We now are expanding that out to the county. Vaping is a huge issue that we're faced with right now, and it's a lot of people saying, yeah, we have to do something, but there's not anyone that has a fantastic answer. So we're trying to pull everybody and bring everybody together. I work with Scott Jones out of the Casper Police Department, talking about all the things with the kids that we have going on. High school, it doesn't matter, east side, west side, but it's some very significant issues of what's being reported in the national news. It's affecting our young population, but we have to educate the parents as well. The parents vape, they think there's nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of like some of the other things that we've talked about over the many years. You know, cigarettes are bad for you, and people who smoke, they don't often acknowledge that, and then now we're in the vaping situation, and it's mostly the flavor packets, the changing in composition, and then those individuals that have THC in the vaping devices. But we're trying to pull together as a community, working with the school district, to get information out there, but it is a high concern. We do have a positive case of respiratory distress due to vaping in Uinta County. So far, nothing in Natrona County, so I'm hoping that it can stay that way. We also have public health preparedness. This is, I don't know if you've heard some of the drills that we participate in. We're always prepared to have mass vaccination clinics. So if anthrax or the plague or whatever comes about, we're always prepared that we have to get vaccination out to every person that lives in Natrona County. There's 40 of us, and it makes it a little interesting, but we have a trailer that we take wherever we need to go. So we practice often with our back to school clinics and our flu clinics, like the Casper Senior Center. That's a pod exercise for us. We're training under emergency preparedness, but we actually provide the vaccine, flu vaccine, as if we were preparing for some kind of disaster. Constant training, constant support. It's a whole different mechanism as far as chain of command and different language, but we all make it and get through. And then we also have the Wyoming Cancer Resource Services Grant, which provides services to Natrona, Niobrara, Converse, and Carbon County. So we provide services for breast and cervical cancer. We have incentives to get HPV vaccines out into the community. So if they go for one, we try to incentivize them to get the second one so that we protect and get this out into the public. Survivorship, and then we have sunscreen stations that you may see out in the community or people can rent due to the fact that Wyoming obviously has a high risk of skin cancer. So we're trying to promote that as well as radon. I know that was a lot and I talked fast. So again, we appreciate everything that you do for us. Happy to have anyone come and visit us at any point in time just to see how it's structured and what we do. Any questions?
Any questions from anybody?
Quick one. I noticed when you got down to Cancer Resources, we supply services to 4 counties.
Yes.
Do we get any funding from?
Yes, the State Department of Health provides funding
Okay.
for that. It's minimal, and it hasn't been something that's launched as well as I would like it to, but we're starting to get traction and getting out there. It's really meant to be a broker of services to connect people with the right services and entities that they need to, but we get funding to cover the 4 counties. Same
you.
with the Wyoming AATC covers the entire state.
Do you publish the restaurant ratings?
It is on our website that people can access those. I don't know that they're published, but you can just go to the CNC or CasperPublicHealth.org, and they have it all listed out what those are and how they are.
Well, I know years ago they were, in essence, released publicly and they were
Yep.
put in the newspaper and all that stuff. Is there any plan to get back to doing that? Or?
I don't know. I think that we've kind of moved away from that just due to the fact that complexity of working with the paper to get some of that stuff out and the funding of it. But I mean, it's something that we can definitely look at and consider. We haven't had a lot of success with newspaper as of late due to the decreasing number of people that are actually getting it anymore. But I could be incorrect. Would you like to see that?
I would like to see it, and I know that, you know, the restaurant people hated it back then.
Absolutely.
And they pitched a big tizzy fit about it and everything, and they thought, well, maybe you need to clean up your restaurants.
Yes, absolutely. They are, and I think that's how we got around it, is by posting it on our website. But we could look into
Well, I do know that they,
some different.
you know, I did hear some what I thought was possibly legitimate criticism of that they were rated for things like, well, for instance, if they were in a shopping center and there was a crack in the parking lot clear out there, they got marked down because there was a crack in the parking lot, even though their restaurant might have been just sparkling spick and span.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of a legitimate complaint on their part.
Right.
Because a crack in the parking lot's a lot different than mud on the floor.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Well,
I can
thank you.
definitely take that back and work on that.
Anybody else? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Downtown parking study.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. It's been a number of weeks since the staff and the consultant have unveiled the downtown parking study to all of you. And as a matter of fact, I think it was probably with the previous council, if I remember correctly. Okay, so understandably, the questions that you may have might be different than what the previous council might have had given their exposure to the study. So bear in mind that whatever we talk about tonight, staff would be obviously open and willing to accommodate whatever questions you might have this evening on any element of the study. But with regard to the context that brings us here tonight is more along the lines of potential implementation with regard to aspects of the study that council would want to embrace and move forward with. The biggest element probably of most discussion and so on is that of considering parking meters for parts of the downtown in order to optimize some of the more in-demand spaces that we see in this part of our community. I would like to tell you that while I am intrigued by a number of the efficiencies and so forth that this type of an approach can bring to the organization, I am not enamored with the idea of creating a parking department that many would assume would be a natural sort of second part to an implementation like metering. And so while there is quite a bit of discussion in the study about that and about what that could look like and everything else, I am not prepared to embrace that element of the study and suggest that we need to move forward in creating, like I said, a parking department, if you will. Now, from an accounting standpoint, creating an enterprise makes sense because it's a nice, clean way to account for funds that come forward with regard to a program of that sort. But it should not mean automatically in your mind or any of your constituents' mind that by creating an enterprise as an accounting feature, that we would be automatically creating some sort of department that looks like the water department or looks like the sanitation department or whatever. So please bear that in mind as we go through this. The other thing that I want to just kind of set the table with as it relates to one of the primary elements or recommendations of the study is that indeed the study would suggest that parking inventory is not really our problem. Spaces are there. And spaces, there's adequate amounts of volume to deal with the amount of demand that the downtown has. I like the way that the study indicated, though, that while volume and inventory is not necessarily the problem, access to the right parts of our downtown at the peak times and so forth is probably more of our problem. Hence the, the shade of recommendation as it relates to metering pertaining to only portions of our downtown that would potentially receive that type of an implementation. So I wanted to give you those insights as we get into the staff discussion and presentation, if you will, so that you knew, generally speaking, where we might be coming from. Certainly, the request of council is ultimately to get direction with regard to portions of the implementation that you would like to see happen. I want to be real clear that we do not need that direction tonight. We are under no time crunch. We're not under the gun. We've got time to talk this through, and we can certainly, produce more homework and information for you, and prepare other thoughts and channels of research that you'd like us to follow up on if that's your desire. So be aware of that and understand that while ultimately we do need direction as to which way you want to go, we don't necessarily need a concrete yes or no on parking use, for example, this evening. And so with that, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, if I could, I've asked Ms. Becker and Chief McFeeters to give us some insights with regard to some of what they see by way of the recommendation that we would present. And again, as I mentioned before, please give us your questions and we'll go in that direction, if that's all right.
Council? Thank you, Mr. Napier. You teed that up beautifully. I wanted to share a little bit of the background on the urban center parking plan that was implemented. Back in August, really truly it started probably in July of 2017, the city had just completed the update to the comprehensive plan. And with the comprehensive plan, the need for downtown development came forward, but also the importance of parking. Parking turnover, as Mr. Napier has indicated, so that we can keep our downtown viable. So that came through the comp plan. About that time in August, we had the eclipse. And the excitement that we saw on our downtown streets and the retail excitement in the downtown, just the downtown exploding, caused a lot of excitement as to what downtown Casper could be. And again, in alignment with our comp plan, but also what was going on in this community. However, that fall, what started to happen, again with this issue of turnover, is we started to hear about these topics of food trucks, and the council was beginning to see discussions on preserving a very important asset in downtown, which was in fact parking. And the decisions of whether we utilize this parking and we turn it over, or whether we let it be used for other purposes. So the fall of 2017, we had some extra money left in the MPO fund. The MPO, again, funding a lot of our transit plans. And so we partnered, the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, partnered with the Casper Police Department, put together a steering committee, got a consultant hired who is Kimley Horn, and the gentleman is a transit guru in the field, and we're able to kick off that plan in December of 2017. Again, planning and the Casper Police Department. But through all that, what we did was we pulled together an extensive public engagement with all of the downtown merchants. And what we were able to do, we had a kickoff at the Fox Theater, we had the consultants got out in the coffee shops all over downtown, talked with the business owners themselves. And that really added credibility to this plan, I think very solidly, because they focused their conversations. We had a community open house here, we had a coffee talk, we had an online portal system that went out, and we had fabulous participation by all the downtown businesses, also in the old Yellowstone district. The steering committee made up of 10 downtown businesses who met constantly with the consultants, so the public engagement was there. As Mr. Napier stated, the outcome of this was that the inventory, so the consultant went out looked at the parking inventory all over downtown. The lots, they counted the spaces, but they also counted the usage and clocked when the usage was most high, most low. We looked at the usage even on our own downtown parking structure, which is not used to capacity, and I think all of us know that, and it is something that we do subsidize. But again, the hope was that through parking turnover, that we would begin to utilize the space that we have, but more importantly, be able to get more businesses downtown. Fill the open storefronts by saying there is parking, but let's keep it moving and not have our employees parking in those critical parking spaces, but we want our customers parking there. So again, the outcome from that study, enough spaces, but let's keep them revolving, but let's consider parking meters as a potential, and let's look at enforcement. And so from the police end of it, as I segue now to the chief, again, looking at efficiencies and usage of the space that we have. So let the chief say.
So the decision to hire me was made in December of 2017. And so when I first arrived here, parking was already a topic of discussion and has been ever since. It's not lost on me that when we were talking parades, when we were talking special events, planning guide, when we were talking, working with our Old Yellowstone District, the Downtown Development Association, the concept of parking keeps coming up. And so from the point of view that as we've kind of tried to prioritize the direction that we need to go with the recommendations that are made in this presentation or the plan that was delivered to council some time ago, one of the primary concerns that we need is we undertake the concept of metering. If that is something that wants to be considered, that is something that kind of guides the rest of our response to these recommendations. Now, from the point of view of, one would ask why historically we've had metering here. A decision was made based upon local economic factors at that time that metering was no longer valid. But those economic conditions have changed now where this may be something that is palatable. So overall, as we were discussing food trucks, remember the discussion here in this workroom was that those parking spaces in front of our establishments are valuable. Do we, the great debate on whether or not they wanted a food truck occupying several of those. So each and every time since I've been here that when council undertook the discussion of parking, very frequently the response was that then later on I would be receiving calls on we're having a parking problem in the downtown area. So a merchant would call up and say, I'm having problems with parking out front. We want you to take a look at it. And as I had a chance to talk with those merchants, I took the opportunity to query them, where are your employees parking? And not surprisingly, after much humming and hawing, there was usually an admission of, my employees are parking out on the street. There's very areas that are in demand. And so the concept behind the metering is this, that for the nominal fee of a recommendation, and I think it's consistent and commensurate with other communities throughout the nation, about $1 per hour to have the opportunity to have open parking spaces. What that does do is it encourages the staff and employees and the owners of these downtown businesses to utilize our wonderful parking facility. We're making that, part of the recommendations is that we make that more palatable to people, more better lighting and more attractive to people. But what it does for as we look at the current rates, and I'm quoting these from memory, at $14 a month, somebody can have that, can use that parking facility. So in the interim, during all of this, was the concept of what are we currently doing downtown? Well, currently it's flagged for 2-hour parking downtown. The enforcement of that is highly problematic for us. It's labor intensive. So what we have to have somebody that goes by, we have to document the vehicle as it sits, and then we have to, as we go around, and then we would have to come back and verify that the vehicle hasn't moved, and then determining the vehicle's in violation, then begin the process of the enforcement effort, determining who the registered owner is. That takes a person, and for a while we had a part-time community service officer that was doing that, and quite frankly, she was doing a pretty good job. But on the days when we weren't doing that, and during the, that being a part-time job, people began to know when that was coming and going, and so they knew how to play the game. At the same time, we didn't have a clear-cut ability to come after the people that didn't want to pay their parking citations. So stories were abounding of people that would walk out, take it off their windshield, and crumple it up, throw it on the ground, and drive away because it was harder to track people down. So in combination with our plan, is we've developed a response to the recommendations. We're working very closely with the municipal court. Judge Lund has worked diligently on developing methods to hold people accountable for the parking. It is our opinion that if we want to consider the opportunity for metering, that will alleviate some of the concerns that we would have for the majority of those spaces being occupied by the staff and employees of the businesses, and now make room for the shoppers, the ones that we want coming in, that would be on select roads only, the ones that are most calculated to meet those needs, and it would be for specific times. And I would, for example, I would be considering an appropriate time to be from 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. Therefore, after 6 p.m., when we want people coming down and enjoying dinner and enjoying our burgeoning nightlife that is happening downtown, we want to continue to foster that there would not be a need for using the metering. So our primary concern that I would have for you today is we're working as a police department. We're working very steadfast to develop an enforcement program. But if you were to identify on the map over here all of the areas that are signed right now for 2-hour parking, and understand the logistics of that, then it would not be a surprise to anybody in the room that that's very difficult for us to do. In furtherance of our plans, we, as the city is bringing on the Tyler Industries software package, we wanted to get something that was going to dovetail into that. So Tyler does make a parking enforcement program, and we have budgeted for that, and that's part of the things that this council has approved, so that as we move into this new software package as a city, that we have a tool that we can use. Currently, that tool was kind of the mid-level, and it involves a portable device similar to these, where our employee would be going along and they would document a vehicle. So they would pick 2nd Street, and they would type in the identification tag, the license plate of that vehicle. They would take a picture of the vehicle and the place that it's at, and very specific picture as to whether or not it has moved or not. Then they would go continue on their rounds. When they came back and it was in excess of 2 hours, they would type in that registration plate again, and it would immediately alert our employee that, okay, this one may be in violation. They would do their due diligence, and if it was in violation, then we could begin the enforcement process. That is the package that we currently have, is this computerized system that would aid in the documentation, the gathering of evidence, and the time date stamping of a vehicle. Ultimately, the most efficient way involves automatic license plate readers, which would be a vehicle, and we could mount that on a vehicle, or even on a golf cart type of vehicle. And it would have several cameras, and all we would have to do would be drive down the travel lanes. And the computer itself would be tagging, identifying those license plates, time date stamping them, and creating a digital record of it. 2 hours later, we would just have to drive back by again. Again, I want to focus on it. If you go outside of this building, this whole area is flagged for 2-hour parking. There are whole sections around our downtown area that are flagged for that 2-hour parking. The most efficient way is for our employees to not have to worry about any of that. The most efficient way is for them to be able to go down the sidewalk or drive down the street and see the meter is expired and just deal with, we don't need to gather all of the evidence on that. That's the most efficient way. But I think we're very consistently wanting to come to you that metering, at best, the revenues generated from it it would be hard pressed to see that this would be a source of income for the city, and we probably wouldn't advocate for it to be a source of revenue, but we would want it to help cover the costs of the maintenance of the program, of the continuing efforts to maintain vitality and longevity in our downtown.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, if you were looking for a recommendation from staff, then I would direct your attention to the primary action items listed in your packet. And I would probably list primary action item number 2 as it relates to evaluating potential on-street and off-street parking technology. I would also recommend action item number 4, which deals with the utilization of the parking garage in a more effective manner. I would also suggest that certainly depending on where you want to go with some of these primary questions, item number 8 that talks about the current parking enforcement program and ways that we could improve that and what tools we might need to evaluate for that as well. And then finally, as again an accounting feature relating to what revenue we might generate depending on what direction we go, item number 9, and that would be creating an enterprise fund that would account more closely for those kinds of associated revenues.
Any thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Pro Tem. I remember when we did this, and you looked at it, we only had 2 streets that really saw much red in the little maps that they did the counts on. Obviously 2nd Street, but I see in your letter here, you're talking about 2nd and Wolcott. Those are the areas where we really have a problem.
And the calls are coming in.
Yeah. One of the things that really, I like the technology approach. I think driving the vehicle down the street, and I don't know that it exists. I know there was a whole bunch of new technology that was included in the original study, that they showed some things that are possible. They're really cool. But one of the things that I don't think was ever brought up was the idea, like when you drive down I-470, an iPass situation, where you have a credit card tied to your parking pass. If you don't use it, you don't use it. But if you do use it, you drive by and have an iPass reader, so to speak, and if you throw in $25, it'll get you parked for whatever. And I don't know if that technology exists, but that would be one that I would really like to see, if it could be done. And again, I don't know whether it's out there or not, but that would make things easier. The people that really want to park down there or want to use the garage, you just have your live pass reader, you pull in, and when you run out of money, they just charge you more money.
So, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, thank you for the comment. I think that the one thing that Liz and I for sure can agree on is we like the study that you've been provided is forward thinking. And so as we've looked at how to implement these recommendations, we're considering not only the needs of today, but what streets in 5 years from now may benefit from some type of technology. The efficiency of operation, my recommendation to us would be that if the goal is to provide opportunities for people to take advantage of our downtown area, that should be our guiding thought and our guiding direction. And the best way to do that is to provide for those spaces to be available for those persons who are coming to enjoy our amenities, our restaurants, our bars, and our shopping stores in a way. And we think that if we apply the technology of metering to that, then it drives the people so it increases the utilization of the downtown parking structure. So it's a win-win-win for all of us. I lost my track. I was trying to address your technology question. It'll come to me. I apologize.
It was basically, you have this little sticker you put on your car. It's
So for the time being, parking is a cultural issue of our community. We're habituated to the existing conditions of parking right now, which is, I think people are pretty I freely admit, they're not fearful of an expensive ticket from the police department that the municipal court's going to be able to track them down and hold them accountable. People are not having that fear. We're working on our end to deal with that. And that's going to get better. Right now, we're currently, through a wonderfully efficient community service officer program. We've had 2 of our people successfully promote to positions of leadership in our agency out of the community service officer, and I had one that has a family emergency and left us last week. So we're down to just 1 CSO right now. So that's part of the reason why parking enforcement has had to take a back seat to some of these issues. But right now, one of the things that we would have to concentrate on as a community is to change the habits of our community to reach the desired outcomes. But collectively, our goal is to have a thriving, prosperous downtown that from 7 o'clock in the morning till 1 o'clock at night is a safe, friendly environment that's convenient for our people to enjoy the benefits thereof.
Kristen, do you have a question?
So the Tyler system is obviously, I don't know like what kind of ancillary products they offer. Do they offer like integrated parking meters of some sort, or is that basically just a standardized thing that you buy out of like a catalog?
Mayor Pro Tem, thank you for reminding me what I wanted to talk about. Gone are the days of walking up and putting in your quarter and a nickel and all the change in your pocket and twisting the dial. So whether or not they integrate with an actual parking system, if we have meters, we really don't, it's going to be limited opportunity for that. In the metered section that we would recommend for your consideration, doesn't require that type of system. We have the capacity to do that just by the visual. That car's in violation. The system that does, so the license plate readers, LPRs, the Brazos through Tyler does allow for integration of those technologies. Now, the LPRs have been out now for about a decade. I have personal experience with them, and that technology just keeps getting better and better, but so far it's still a little bit hit and miss. And so, I think that as we develop upon the direction of council, as we develop a response to these recommendations, there is time for us to kind of develop process before outlaying a lot of money for the LPR system. I think technology will improve itself. We're not going to, please don't picture meters. Most communities of our size, they have one pay station in the middle of the block. You park there, you identify, I'm in number 33, you walk over there, you insert your credit card, and you buy time on number 33.
Well, actually, a couple of questions. What is the cost for the public to park, and I'm not talking reserve parking, but public parking in the structure itself?
What is the rate?
The rate.
Basically. Liz, can you tell me that,
The
please?
covered parking in the parking garage is $43 a space per month. They have a business rate of $35 per space per month.
Covered.
Covered. The top level, uncovered, is $20 per space per month. And then if we go in there, you're pulling in for a meeting, it's $1 an hour after 2 hours.
$1 an hour?
When we go in, after 2 hours.
$1 an hour after 2 hours.
Mhm.
So what is it for the first 2 hours?
Free.
Is it free? Okay. The biggest problem that I see downtown and working down there previously is that, and this is nothing new or shocking, but all the employees down there for each one of those businesses take up all those spaces. And so I'm in favor of putting meters down there just simply because it's going to move. And I don't know how it's set up right now in the parking structure as far as the reserve, but if employees can purchase parking spots and pay a monthly fee and put those further up in the structure itself, and then a couple of the bottom floors be public parking, and you put meters out on the street, but maybe just change that to where it's free parking in the structure, then people would obviously want to park for free. and not have to pay. It seems like the biggest issue that we have in this town is that it's so far for us to walk from one store to the next that parking structure is just very inconvenient because it takes forever to get places. So I think the meters are gonna take care of the problem with the employees because they're not gonna wanna park out there and pay by the hour, which is going to take care of your problem, or you would think it would, of moving them into the structure. Because I can drive down there any given day, and I know a lot of those vehicles and who the employees are that constantly they'll move from one street to the next and park so they don't have to walk so far. So I'm behind the meters. The LPR I'm not really 100% behind because there are issues with it, but that's a whole nother technology that we're gonna have to invest more money into. Where essentially you get out and read the meters and you know who's in violation.
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman, I am not advocating that we rush out and buy LPRs. I have personal experience with the technology. It is marketed well on how efficient it is, but the reality, when it actually gets into use, it has a lot of hiccups in it. I am absolutely advocating we wait until the hiccups get fixed. That technology is improving rapidly. The cameras are amazing these days. The computer technology, one of the things that I like about LPR is when it comes to my community service officers, who are going to be my primary enforcement arm for dealing with parking, they are not armed. And that LPR system provides them, without their having to do anything, it alerts them that vehicle, it belongs to a fugitive that is dangerous, and they would be instantly aware. They don't mess with that vehicle. They notify the gun carrying officers to come deal with that. From an aspect of safety, we're going to keep monitoring when that technology creeps up, continues to advance to the point where it lives up to what they sell it as being incapable of doing. Because right now they sell it really high, but when it comes to the practicality of it, it misses too much.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
To follow on the cost, you were talking about capital, that was covered in the study, and there is a capital cost to invest in those meters, and they're anticipating a payback of 1.3 years.
Okay.
Okay. So that was one of my next questions then. What are the upgrade costs then to the parking structure to make it to where that needs to be? Because I think we're talking about safety and things like that.
And Your Honor, you all had allocated $97,000 a year ago, of which we spent all but $20,000 on all the lights. And I know Mr. Beamer's team worked on that project. So we've got all the new lights installed, 115 new lights throughout the entire parking structure. And so we have $20,000 left still in our capital that we're working currently on the security camera upgrades, so that the little booth that's there within the parking structure will have access for playback in case there's any vandalism or any issues there from a safety standpoint. So that project is currently being worked on with, I don't know if it's Comtronics that Colin was working on, but that project is also going. So we've had the painting done. We've done the lighting, the reflective painting to make it brighter in there. We've done all the lighting, and now it's been the cameras for the upgrade.
I think my final question is, if we did go with the meters, and you talked about not creating a parking division itself, obviously CPD would be in charge of enforcement into things. Who would be in charge of the service end of things for the meters themselves? That if maintenance need to be done on a more collection of, well, I guess you really wouldn't have collection, but service.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, great question. My hope would be that the vendor that we purchase these things from would be the one that would provide the service and respond to our service calls and that kind of thing. If indeed that's not a possibility, we would find a way to incorporate those service needs within our existing staff. I appreciate what the chief said about the funding issue, because a lot of times the mistaken perception is that cities and towns put these types of programs in as a means of trying to supplement the general fund. And I don't view that as a winning strategy at all. I would say that the funding that we would generate on a program of this nature should really only be the funding necessary to cover the costs of maintaining the equipment like you're talking about and doing the periodic replacements and, you know, software upgrades and those kinds of things, and that would be it.
Your Honor, I wanted to clarify, especially with all the media here, the costs I gave you were projected costs. As we look forward to this, I wanted to correct the numbers that you wrote down. So the first one on the cost for covered parking is $37 per month. For business parking, it's $32. And for the uncovered on the top level, it's $14. That's where we stand currently.
Not
Thank
20,
you.
but 14.
Correct. So
on top.
they all
Okay.
came down a little bit.
Micah,
Yeah, Mr. Vice Mayor, I don't have so much a question as a couple of comments. I appreciate and I agree with the idea that the city should be doing things to try to help to promote downtown, try to help promote every part of town, actually. But, you know, I'm sitting here and it's a little bit difficult for me to be sympathetic to a set of merchants that they sit there and they complain that, well, there's inadequate parking around my business, but it's all gobbled up by my employees and by the neighboring stores' employees and that kind of thing. And then they come to the city wanting us to do something about it. Well, it would seem to me that the first thing, if they're really concerned about that, would be that they could tell their employees and themselves, don't gobble up all of the parking places right in front of our place or in front of the neighbor's place there, and then, you know, that problem could be solved that way. Now, I appreciate that there are, I know that there are merchants that are sensitive to that and that try to work and encourage their employees, you know, to do that, and they practice good manners themselves. But then if the guy next door to them doesn't, then that's a little bit of a problem. And so I don't know what the answer to that is, other than to tell them to be nice to each other. We all know how good that works. But it is, it's just, you know, there's part of me that just wants to sit here and say, it's you guys' problem, you fix it. You know, meaning the downtown people. You know, you're the ones that are, you know, here's a study. There's enough space down there, you solve the problem. And so I don't know, you know, that's just a comment, and I would invite comments in response to that.
Ken and Bob.
I'd have to agree with you. It's to a point an employee issue in Tance to fix it. The businesses could buy the parking permit for their employees to park in the garage instead of doing the meters. Having the employees pay to be parked in the garage. I take account of what does most of those employees make when you bring it down to what they make to the price that it is to park in the garage. That's just a concern of mine that, you know, me personally, you know, a person that works down there that has a family, that's a bit of money for them. Some people are like, it's $37 or it's $14. That adds up. 14 for the year, that's $168. For a family that's struggling, that's working down there, that's a lot of money to them, in my opinion. Second, so I agree with the employees. Businesses could pay for them to go there if that's what they want, to alleviate parking. The other aspect that I guess I look at is putting in the meters. Then we're also asking those tourists that want to come downtown, that might drive down because they have a rental car that they're renting, plus they spent the money or drove down, spent the money on hotels, spent the money on buying stuff, spent the money on this and that. Now they're going to pay for parking down there.
on top of their vacation. And I understand that happens in many, many cities. Respectfully, I understand that. But why do we have to? So that's my comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I've been going to the DCBA meetings, Downtown Casper Business Association meetings for a few years, and they are acutely aware that their employees do that, and they really do try and explain to their employees that it's to their advantage from a business standpoint, their employer standpoint, that they go use the garage. But the truth is, they'll go around the block, not park in front of their particular business, but they'll go around the block and they'll park there. But DCBA is acutely aware of it, and I believe if we had some kind of a metering system, that would take that away. There certainly is room to park downtown. You may have to walk a couple of blocks, but I think meters are probably the only way around that.
Chris and Jensen?
Just really quick. I definitely don't think that we should be in the business of deciding if the business or the employee pays. That's the employee's decision when they take the job. That's a cost that they know comes with it, or they can park outside of the metered area and walk. I mean, that's absolutely not something that we should be involved with. The only thing that I'd say is I have noticed like some of the areas, obviously, we have to go to Denver a lot to Children's for my son who broke his back, and there are some areas like we do shopping in, and in a lot of them, like the first 15 minutes is free, and I think that that's changed just like with all of these things like DoorDash and like those apps where somebody could order from Making Tins, but it's basically like an Uber driver picking up their order where they just really need to park there for say 3 minutes, go inside, pick up the order, hop back in the car, and they leave. So I just didn't know if the study had that's obviously like a very new development.
That wasn't in this study.
So all of that makes perfect sense. Remember our longtime mayor, council, I apologize. Our goal on this is the long-time growth and expansion of the vitality of our downtown. So we need to be not thinking of what do we need today. We need to be thinking of what's coming. You're absolutely correct, and that would be something that we can identify parking spots. This is a temporary one. We can meet all of these needs. That you're absolutely Uber Eats is a thing.
Yep.
And we need to be able to accommodate that. So as we ask, when we're asking ourselves, is this a poor management and employee issue, or if it's something that is impacting the development and growth of our downtown, as businesses look at those vacant opportunities that are there right now, one of the things that they're factoring in is can customers get to me?
Yep.
And so this isn't, the fact that some management or owners are less responsible than others. It might be in our community's best interest to weigh in on in a way that manages the flow of traffic, creates those opportunity for growth and development. And I would just finish by personalizing this. Council has heard this from my lips before, but it bears repeating. When I came to the city of Casper for my interview process, I got out of my vehicle and I walked through this downtown area. I saw the David Street station. I saw the crowds that were walking. There were specific ones. I was one of the deciding factors of, okay, I'm all in, I want this job, and I'm going to get it, was a thriving downtown. I cannot help but extrapolate my feelings to the other persons that are thinking about moving here. They're traveling through, they stopped and stayed at the hotel, and they see that thriving, prospering, fun downtown that is enjoyed by families, and it's enjoyed by adults, through all hours of the day and into the night. That lends itself to continued prosperity for our community. So we're not just developing our downtown only. I think it is impacting Casper overall. It has the capacity to do that. If we do our jobs correctly, I think I would submit that we are positively impacting not only problems we're facing today, but also the future.
So Charlie wanted me to share his thoughts on on this subject as well, and he says that there's no way to get shared parking without metering, and that every time it has looked at free versus metering, parking has gone with metering not for the money but for the turnover of spaces and access to businesses. So that's Charlie's comments on this. Mike, do you have another?
Yeah, a question that I have, and I don't remember seeing this in the parking study, but I know they talked about employees. Was there anything in there where they looked at downtown residents?
Yes,
And could you talk about that for a minute?
Your Honor. You all received the executive summary, and the entire plan is available on our website. But that was one component that was discussed, and the key themes, and I may have to, I don't wanna quote. In the surveys that were done on resident parking, in essence, 54% of the surveys said that there was enough resident parking because we have code requirements within the city to require residential parking for the residents. 46% felt that there was not. And again, there is not space when people come to visit or come for a party in a downtown area. So the swing was 54 yes, 46% said there was not enough parking. That was a question in the online survey. I would have to really spend some time looking through this study for a little bit more detail in that survey.
Because I know that like the Wyoming National, I think their parking plan was some
Structure.
spaces in the structure.
45 places in the structure.
And if we have any concept of, because every time I go downtown, all the spaces around Wyoming National are all taken. You know, they just aren't. And so I'm just wondering if there's been any looking at that.
Mayor, Councilman, so one of the strategy points, the recommendations that appears repeatedly is the concept of shared parking. And that is that partnership between private organizations who own vacant land. And a lot of those, that is an opportunity, and we're encouraged in this plan to develop shared parking partnerships and agreements within our community to allow for opportunities. And that's going to be the primary location for these residential parking needs of something that meets their needs. It's close by their residence. So that concept of these shared parking agreements, that is something we're encouraged to embrace and to facilitate.
And I agree that's a good thing, but I still remember my good friend Dean Serslet when he had his Dean Sporting Goods downtown, which was way before your time. But at least you're not sitting there saying, well, I wasn't born yet. But he had researched that, and he went out to the mall, and the average length to walk was a long, he said people could park clear over on Durbin. He was there right next door to the Wonder Barn. And they could park on Durbin and it'd still be closer than walking from a parking lot and that. And so I appreciate that, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Okay, so do we want to give direction tonight to staff on any of this? So we do have 3 council members that are missing.
Go forth and do good.
I don't know that I'm convinced 100% on metered parking. There's still more things that I'd like to research, but somebody have anything else?
Do it.
I think we should wait for the other council before making any decisions to get their thoughts and opinions as well.
Anybody else?
I guess if we're gonna wait, I would like it to be sooner rather than later. I mean, this has been a continuing discussion that we really need to stop pushing to the back burner.
Well, Mr. Vice Mayor, I just say as much as I am fundamentally opposed to the idea of parking meters downtown and that, I think that some variation of that is probably something that needs to be really studied. And so I would kind of, I don't know if it, look at it any further if the view's going to change or if there's going to be any further enlightenment. I don't know. But beyond that, I think, yeah, we should, I'm not ready to move forward.
You're not?
Not at this point, no. I'd want everybody else here and maybe a little bit more input on that.
Okay. So, we wanna wait until we get more council members and some more information?
Could we put this on the next work session agenda, at least for
Or
further
the,
discussion?
Yeah, I think if we're setting a definitive date, then I'm okay with waiting.
well,
And
the next
note-
one,
And note on there that, council direction or.
the next one we got speed limit discussion, so that might take up most, but we could certainly do October 22nd. Everybody's okay with that?
So you're saying take it up again on October 22nd?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have a problem with that. The only thing is I don't think we're ready to go my parking meters within the next 8 months, so that's not sure it makes much difference, but I still think parking meters are an ultimate help to us.
Is everybody okay with the 22nd?
Okay.
Okay.
It'll take a while for me to get used to it.
You should try and park in front of my house.
All right.
We can discuss that.
Finance policies phase 2.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. As we indicated a few weeks back, we had a number of concepts we wanted to run by you in more of a phased approach pertaining to finance policies. This would be our second installment of that conversation, and it deals with procurement, change orders, and general purchasing policies, sole source purchasing, and those kinds of things. You've probably had the opportunity to read through a number of the guidelines and the actual policy statements that Tom and his team have put together. There's a couple of things in here that I think are very interesting that I guess I'd highlight now, and that is with regard to, for example, with regard to the investment policies and so forth that the city would embrace and move forward with. I really like the idea of creating an investment advisory council that would use members of the private sector to help guide us with regard to input and ideas and strategies and so forth pertaining to trying to maximize the city's resources and investments and so on. That to me is an exciting change, if you can view any of this as exciting. There are some other ideas in here relating to change orders and sole source purchasing in particular that does suggest the threshold by which those authorizations take place be adjusted. The current thresholds that are in place now are ones that are fairly old and have fallen out of consistency with regard to state statute. That isn't in and of itself isn't necessarily an issue, because council can certainly be stricter than what statute would suggest. But from a workflow standpoint, it might make sense to consider the changes with regard to some of those thresholds and making them a little more forgiving, as it were, in terms of some of the values that are placed on those items. Beyond that, if it would please the council, we could certainly have Mr. Pitlick address some of the other larger portions of these policies, and then open it for questions if that would help.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Council. Carter hit the highlights pretty well. And again, as he mentioned, these existing policies date back as far as 2001. So, you know, they're nearly 20 years old. So this is just more to bring a lot of these in line with more current practice. A couple of the major changes, again, is right now we're requiring departments or anybody going out for requisitions to get 3 quotes from anything from $1,000 over another 20,000. And that policy was set, I believe, back in 2001. And just to make it, again, bring it forward a little bit, we're suggesting that be raised to $2,000 and to up to $35,000. $35,000 is the current state statute for requirement of formal bids for products and materials. So that would bring that in line with the state statute. And again, as Carter mentioned, with a lot of these other ones too, kind of follow along with that. This would, suggestion would increase the purchasing authority for the city manager from $20,000, which was set back in 1999, and at that time was consistent with the state statute maximum amount. The state statute got changed in 2008 to $35,000. The policy for the city of Casper never did change with that, so that basically would bring that forward to match what the state's policy is. And again, as Mr. Napier mentioned, it's not a requirement, certainly could be more restrictive, and keep it at 20, but we just feel that it would be good to bring it up to that level to match the state and just provide a little more efficiency. And the other thing was sole source purchases. Right now, every sole source purchase comes to the council. This recommendation would give the city manager the authority to approve sole source purchases up to $35,000. Anything over that would require a formal bid, plus would require the council's direction to approve that be sole source.
Any questions?
No, it all looked really good.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I'd be more interested in hearing a little bit more about this. You were talking about like an advisory board or an advisory group. I'd be interested in hearing a little more about that.
Good. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman, the challenge that we face is that the environment that we work in with regard to trying to maximize interest income and investment strategies in a public sector setting is limited but complex. And you know, cities and towns can't always guarantee that we have the corner on cutting edge insights as it relates to investment strategy and what might make sense, and you know, when it makes sense to move funds and those kinds of things. Tom and I had a real similar practice to this in another organization that he and I worked with. And it was a real good way to engage the public in a very productive and expert-based way to ensure that the city was doing the best that it could with regard to the resources that they have been endowed with. Furthermore, I think it helped from a transparency standpoint to, in circles that would know about these kinds of things, communicate what it is that we're doing so that people could either be reassured or not so much if they thought there was a better way to handle these things. So the council not only proved as a way to get some real good expert guidance when we may not have had all that always on hand, but to also enhance the transparency by which the city's, i.e. taxpayers' resources, were being managed.
Well, and beyond that, is there any thought about having sort of like a business practices advisory board that goes beyond just an investment advisory board, but geez, you know, you guys are running your shop down there, and no business would ever run a shop the way that you do it, or you're running this or that. And I'm not picking on the city shop, but that just came to mind. But you know, anything. How about anything like that? I'm just asking.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman, there are definitely cities around the country that have commissions, if you will, that oversee various operational functions of the city. There could be a public safety commission. There could be a public services commission.
Well, and excuse me for interrupting, but I don't know that having a governing commission would mesh really well with the city manager form of government, because, you know, the last thing that I ever advocate for doing is, well, we're going to establish a committee that's gonna come in and tell you, the city manager, how to do this or how to do that, but I mean more in terms of like an advisory, thing or something like that. And I apologize for butting in, but.
No, that's okay.
I wanted to kind of nudge you in the direction of what I'm looking to hear about.
Well, I appreciate that, thank you. And to answer a little more succinctly then, I guess I'd say I'm not really aware of an advisory function of that nature, unless, Mr. Pitlick, you might be.
Not an advisory nature. I do know, like especially in the utilities, they do use the services of consultants that periodically come in and review the plans and the rate structure and things like that. They kind of give guidance to make sure we're on the right track. But beyond that, and again for the investment advisory committee, we do use D.A. Davison does a lot of our investments, but it's been useful, at least in my experience, to have a small group that can read the tea leaves and actually challenge the people doing investing to get their idea of what they're looking at as far as the markets and make sure that they're kind of in line, and it just gives us in finance a little more reassurance, and hopefully you and council a little more reassurance that there is this board of expertise that we're not looking for them to tell us what to invest in or do the investments for us, but certainly help us review our policies and to help challenge, if you will, where our investments are going.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Petlick and his crew for doing this. It's been a long time coming that we have a real updated policy manual from a financial standpoint. But regarding the issue that you're talking about, I know a couple of our joint powers boards, well, probably all the joint powers boards, they typically will have some investment ability, but currently we rely on the city to kind of do that because they certainly don't have the resources that even the city has. So the idea of doing your paragraph in there about lease purchase and conduit financing, I think those are particularly appropriate for joint powers boards to be able to use that resource that you're talking about putting together. So I think it's a good idea.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, we will be coming back with further phases in that we aren't totally done with our list. So I bet you we would have potentially as many as 5 phases in total by the time we're all said and done. So thank you for your support and your patience through all that.
All right, moving on to agenda setting. We've already got the parking study for October 22nd. I see 2 staff suggested items here. They're pretty time sensitive then.
Mr. Mayor, Pro Tem, the bottom topic there regarding wayfinding is very timely with regard to the fact that we will have the consultant in town at that point. And so if it would please the council, we'd really like to have that reserved on your calendars if possible.
Sounds good.
That's good.
Yep.
Put that
Great.
one there.
Great, excellent, thank you.
And what's with the historic preservation strategic plan?
Mr. Mayor, Pro Tem, Liz, do you want to touch on that real quickly? The Historic Preservation Strategic Plan discussion?
Your Honor, members of council, we had a historic preservation plan commissioned earlier this year. It's funded through a grant through the state. We're at the final steps of that. The plan's been completed. It has been approved by the our local Casper Historic Preservation Commission, too many words, pardon me, which is overseen by the Community Development Department, and the consultant would like to do a Skype presentation with you. She is in Idaho, has got some health concerns. I know I can't say more than that, but would like to present it to you on the screen behind me and just step through the data that has been presented on that. So again, we're proposing, I don't know what the time allocation is, but I'm thinking 10 to 15 minutes is again we have to review it with you. We would like then to do adoption, which would fulfill the requirement with the state SHPO office that we do need to have a strategic plan on record to be qualifying for grants and some of the work that we've done downtown. So that's a quick Cliff Notes version.
Is everybody comfortable putting that on the 22nd? Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
I'll let her know.
What do we got so far?
We got 3 items at this point.
Want to add any more? Does anybody have anything else they want to add to that meeting? Let me see. A lot of these are after. Let me see.
We're getting pretty close to where we probably want to get the Maddie's presentation on vehicle licensing in, only because in order to get her in prior to the legislative session, I mean, if we're already looking at the end of October, we're starting to get a little crunchy there.
Okay. Is everybody good with that one? The 22nd? Okay.
Very good, we'll reach out to that family.
Okay.
You betcha.
I think that makes us pretty full for that meeting. Anything for legislative review that you have at all, Carter?
Well, Mr. Mayor, we had a number of committee meetings take place over the last couple of weeks, since the last time we talked about legislative issues. Some really interesting conversation that took place in the Revenue Committee this past week in Pinedale, as you probably have read about. One of the items that came up in the Revenue Committee, in addition to what you read about, is with regard to working with cities and counties and trying to get a little more hegemony pertaining to approaching the respective citizenries and so on for tax-related issues and whatnot. And so we're hoping to streamline that relationship with some legislation that might be friendly to those ideas. Additionally, in Jackson, Corporations Committee met, and they did pass some surface water legislation out of committee. And so we're hopeful that that legislation will find some buoyancy in the legislative deliberations on the floor, and maybe with any luck we'll have something we can work with come March of next year. And that's all I have.
Okay. All right, we'll go around the table. We'll start with you, Ken.
Nothing.
Kristen?
Nothing today.
Bob?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Mike?
I'm hiding behind Steve.
Steve, you have anything? No. Okay, and I don't have anything either. So, that's it.
An exciting day.
It's not even 6 o'clock yet. Look at that.
Whew. Actually getting dinner on a Tuesday? What is this?
No executive session. I might add.
I know, I even checked. I was like,
Tell us what's for dinner.
ooh, what is for dinner? I think shake and bake and urban butter rice, some roasted
I think you're
veggies.
the only one.